Unit 2 consists of Population Chapter 2 and Migration Chapter 3. Starting today, we'll start with Population, Key Issue 1. There's the unit objectives. We'll talk about tests later. Content objective for Key Issue 1. Students will describe the patterns of human population distribution and concentration in the United States and major regions of the world. The ICANN statements for Key Issue 1. Define ecumen and non-ecumen. 2. Explain how physical factors influence the distribution of population using site and situational factors. 3. Describe regions where population is clustered and where it is dispersed. 4. Describe 3 types of density used in population geography and apply arithmetic density to understanding population patterns. 5. Explain how population densities and concentrations are 2 different measurements. And 6. Explain regional variation within a country. Explain regional population variation within a country. Let's take a look at population concentrations. There are 4 regions where we have clusters. Clusters, remember, is a form of distribution, is either clustered or it's dispersed. The clusters are East Asia. When we look at East Asia, 1/4 of the world's population is in East Asia, China being the largest of the countries, the second largest being Japan, and then also encompassing Korean Peninsula. Keep in mind, China has the 4th largest, the Republic of China is the 4th most populous country in the world and the 4th largest country in land size. And when we talk about Japan and Koreans, they're mostly clustered in urban areas. Cluster number 2 is South Asia. South Asia consists of 1/4 of the world's population. Most live in India. India is the 2nd most populous country in the world and the fastest growing population in the world. And it also makes up Pakistan, that ranks in the top 8 most populous countries in the world, and Bangladesh, that ranks in the top 8, and then also includes Sri Lanka. When we look at the Indus River and the Ganges River, there's heavy concentration along both of those water or river coastlines. The 3rd is Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is with the largest of Southeast Asian islands being Indonesia. It is also the islands comprise. It's the largest archipelago in the world. India. It's the world Indonesia is the 4th most populous country in the world, and the population is concentrated on the island of Java, with more than 100 million people. Europe is the 4th largest cluster, but the fastest declining. And when we talk about Europe, 3/4 of the inhabitants live in urban areas, and very few are in rural areas where they are taking on occupations as farmers. The other clusters in the world, the 5th largest cluster would be the northeastern portion of the United States and the southeastern portion of Canada. And Africa is also a cluster that is a rapidly growing region that will be a cluster by 2050. When we look at the entire globe, we can divide it into 7 regions. Each of the different colors represents about 1 billion people. Currently, our world is at about 7.6 billion people. So we can see that if we take the Eastern Hemisphere, including portions of Asia that's been subdivided into other portions of Asia, you take Asia that's been broken into Russia, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, China, and then broken down into the Korean Peninsula, Japan, and then you have South Asia, and then you have the Southeast Asia with Laos, Thailand, Indonesia. Those 4 areas represent 3 billion people. Roughly half of the world's population is found in the Eastern Hemisphere. And if you take Europe and you take Africa, now we have 5 billion people that are found in those regions alone. And then with the addition of the regions of North America. Oh, and it looks like this map is missing a region. Oh, it should also have China as 1.5 billion people. I don't see China on here. So China would represent over half of the world's population is in the Eastern Hemisphere. And if we want to look at it another way, about 2.5 to 3 people of the 7.6 billion people are either from India or China. All right, let's take a look at the cartogram. Remember back to Unit 1. This type of math shows the size of population determines the shape of the country. China, as already mentioned, is the most populous country in the world, but India is the fastest growing. As soon as this year, 2020, or as late as 2025, India will surpass China in overall population. And then we can take a look at the third most populous country, that being the United States. But there's a huge discrepancy between China and India in terms of overall population. But let's just take a look at the Eastern Hemisphere again. We can see the countries with high populations being in ranking order from China to India to Pakistan to Bangladesh to Indonesia to Philippines to Japan. We can see the countries that make up the largest population in the Eastern Hemisphere. All right, and the population distribution in this choropleth map shows that population is not uniformly distributed. We can see, as already mentioned, if we look at India and South Asia, right here we can see the population is concentrated in a linear pattern along the Ganges River. We can also see the same with China, with a linear pattern dotting the coastline, where we see the largest, the concentration is along the coastline, the extent of spread is along the coastline. And then we can look at North America. We can see that we have two clusters, the largest concentration in the Northeast and a smaller concentration in the Southwest. All right, non-ecumen, places that are too dry, too wet, too cold, or too high. When we talk about dry lands, we're talking about 20% of Earth's land surface. That comprises deserts. They lack sufficient water to grow crops. And then also this region controls much of the non-renewable oil reserves, which we talked about last unit on Kyushu 4 of Chapter 1. The wetlands. This is a land where most of the land is inhospitable for human occupation because with a combination of heat and rain, it depletes nutrients from the soil and hinders agricultural production. Cold lands is another region. These are in our poles, North Pole and South Pole. Much of these regions contain ice or permafrost, and these also are unsuitable for crop production or animal survival. Highlands is another area. Himalayas would be an example of the highest mountain peaks. These are steep covered mountain peaks that make it uninhabitable for humans, most humans, and they also make it less likely to grow crops and also to extract water and irrigation at those high levels. Places that are not too harsh, where we have permanent human settlement, they're called ecumen. Again, when we take a look at too hot, too cold, we see the too hot, the largest desert, Saharan desert, and then we see Australia, which is mostly desert. And then we can see the Gobi Desert, the Taklamakan Desert, then the cold regions in the northern, near the Arctic Circle. We can't see the Arctic Circle here, but the Arctic Circle is right around there. And then also near Antarctica. When we look at too hot is going to be the Amazon rainforest right here. And then also down here in South Africa. Too hot, and then highlands will be, here's the Himalayas, or Himalayan mountains, and then the Atacama Desert right through here. All right, so we can see what's happened to ecumen over the span of 5,000 before Common Era during the first ancient civilizations to post-1900 Common Era. And we can see that still about 3/4 of the world's population lives on only 5% of Earth's surface, and oceans make up 71% of all land. We can look at projections for population We can see current populations, well, I should say in 2017 in the table, and we can see by 2050 India will surpass China, as already mentioned. But note all of the countries from sub-Saharan Africa that has the fastest growing population and will be a cluster, one of the 4 clusters in the world. And also notice what cluster will drop out, as already mentioned, Europe. And we can see Europe has largely dropped out by 2017. So this table shows us how fast Europe's population is declining. And then we can take a look at the world population and how really we see exponential growth starting in the 1900s to current today, well, and projected to continue growth. And most of that growth is going to be in less developed countries, which we'll talk about, which we find in the chart over here. In fact, the only developed countries in 2050 that are in here are the United States, and that's it. All other countries are developing countries. So 9 of the 10 by 2050 will be the most populated countries in the world, as shown in this bar chart with the most population growth in those regions. All right, which of the following boxes is in an area where the population density is high and has low economic development? Anyone? B is the correct answer, sub-Saharan Africa. All right, let's talk about regional variation in population. There's uneven economic development, so that will help us understand population distribution. We look at eastern Brazil experiences growth, more growth than the sparsely inhabited western regions. Again, population is going to help us where we see population density, high arithmetic density, and then also concentration. Along coastlines will tell us that oftentimes those are going to be in where economic activity is found in major cities. It's a great video. I encourage you to watch it on your own. And that will conclude our notes today.